I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. We're going to bring in California Governor Gavin Newsom live in just a moment. He is holding a press conference after a meeting with local business leaders and small businesses who have been impacted by the ongoing terrorizing immigration raids. And he's showing up to support their communities and support them. We hear that he's going to be speaking about his visit, talking about the horrendous raids. He's going to be talking about last night's win of the Trump regime demobilizing 2,000 National Guards people after he unlawfully sent the National Guard into Los Angeles. And I think he's also going to be addressing an effort to redistrict California if, in fact, Texas is going to engage in a gerrymander there. California Governor Newsom, has basically said to Texas, if you think that you're going to try to change 5 seats to go Republican, in California, we've been doing this the right way. And there are still 8 seats that could be gerrymandered in California. So if that's how you want to do it, you can do some simple math. 8 is bigger than 5, but why are we throwing out these norms in the first place? By the way, I'm not sure if you saw California Governor Newsom's recent podcast he did with, I think, the right-wing podcaster Sean Ryan. One of the points that Governor Newsom, I think, has been effectively making, we'll see if he talks about it at the press conference, is he goes, California is a donor state. It gives $80 billion more to the federal government than it takes from the federal government, unlike Texas, which takes $50 billion more than it gives to the federal government. Look, folks, if California was a country, it would have the 4th largest GDP of all countries in the world. If you take all of the Democratic states in the country, they account for about 76% of all economic output in the United States. If you just look at Los Angeles County, LA would be the 4th largest. If LA was a state, it would be the 4th largest donor state in the country, but it's a county. So the Trump regime continues to attack blue states, which are mostly all donor states, with California being the 4th largest GDP in the country. And the red states, by and large, controlled by Republicans, are failed states. If they were countries, they would be failed countries. They would look like, the types of dictators that Trump admires, who have disastrous GDPs, disastrous economies, and they are relying on the blue states to fund them anyway. Long rant by me. Suffice to say, I'm excited to hear California Governor Gavin Newsom's press conference. Okay, he's going live. Let's bring in California Governor Gavin Newsom right now. Let's hear what he has to say. Let's play it.
Thank you all. Just had an opportunity to talk to the senior pastor here at Downey Memorial Community Church. We're grateful that she allowed us the opportunity to be here and highlight a little bit of what occurred here, as you may know, in the parking lot a few weeks back when 6 folks came masked without any identification, unmarked cars, and came into the parking lot demanding she get out of the way, demanding she not film, demanding as if they were running the place, demanding she simply walk away. She knew her rights. She exercised her rights. I think it's important to highlight that. It's one thing to know your rights. Another important and imperative thing to do is to exercise them. And she did that. She videotaped what occurred. And it's an example of what's occurring all over here in Southern California, what's occurred at a level we've not seen in modern times. I just had an opportunity to visit with business leaders, small business. When I say mom and pop, I mean mom, dad, kids, grandkids, generational businesses in Bell. I met one business owner. They've been 20 years in business. They said, we miss COVID. They said it was much easier. They have lost 80% of their business. And they said they've lost something more precious, which really put it in perspective. They said they've lost a sense of community. They said they missed their customers, not the business. They missed the tables being filled. That's what a family business is all about. They're barely making ends meet. They're trying some catering work. They have a 15-year employee. He won't even show up to work. He's here with documentation, but he's scared to death. He hasn't shown up in weeks since 4 raids occurred and nearby. He won't even show up because he's scared to death of being pulled over for simple reason because of the way he looks, because he's being racially profiled. I met a mother and her beautiful daughter. Daughter's going to Bible school. She just got off. She was walking into an ice cream store. And her mom came to me. She says, I'm here legally, but I'm carrying my passport if you need any proof. I said, you don't need to impress me. She's here legally. She's carrying her passport, and her daughter is just coming back from Bible school. That's Trump's America. 2025. Downey and Bell, California. LA County. The most diverse, most populous county, and the most diverse and most populous state in the world's most diverse democracy, the United States of America, in 2025. It's a disgrace. The President of the United States decided to advance his rote cruelty by utilizing the brave men and women of the National Guard as pawns in an effort to theatrically show his strength. He federalized the National Guard. He deployed roughly 5,000 military, not overseas. In fact, his entire first term, President of the United States did not even send the military boots on the ground overseas. His entire first term. First 6 months of his administration, he decides to send them to the United States of America, 5,000 military, 4,000 federalized with the National Guard, close to 1,000 U.S. Marines. He sent them to a United States city. The utilization rate of our National Guard, less than 5%. You spent hundreds of millions of dollars, wasted hundreds of millions of dollars on this. 5%. By the way, the folks that were taken and brought into armories waiting for a mission assignment are summer school teachers, our paramedics, our firefighters, our police officers themselves. Finally, because of the absurdity of this and the complete incapacity of the Pentagon to reconcile the fact they weren't doing a damn thing, they manipulated this 26% number. It's about 5%. They even realized the absurdity of this, and they're talking about a demobilization of roughly 2,000 of the 79th Infantry. That process will take a couple weeks. They'll go through medical reviews and exams. They'll be in the process of filling out their pay stubs, getting reimbursements for travel, trying to get their lives back on track. We still have thousands of National Guard. The 49th MPs, you know them well here in Southern California. Those are the 49th MPs that spend 45 days up to 60 days doing recovery and protecting the people of Los Angeles. They're still waiting for the Pentagon to get their act together, to end this theater once and for all. This cruelty. It's about terrorizing communities. It's about appearing tough. I've said it and I'll repeat it. Weakness masquerading as strength. Weakness masquerading as strength. And so we're here mindful of people living here. I said to someone, I said, I got it easy. No. White guy, all the privileges. Talking to members of the community, they feel like democracy is already gone. For me, it still seems to be, on life support, but moving along. They feel like authoritarianism's already come to their community. They're not even walking the streets. We were here not just in businesses that are empty. The entire shopping mall's empty. It's summertime. There was no one till that young woman came in with that young girl came in with her mom. There was no one in the ice cream store in the middle of the day in the summer. One of the most beautiful communities, Bell, in California. Tourists. You said, what happened to the tourists? Not just from Mexico, not just from Canada, from Europe. They said the tourists aren't coming. Wrecking the economy, destroying families, destroying generational businesses. I spent the morning with Officer Cano's family, a CHP officer that just lost his life a few weeks ago. Half of the service was in Spanish. They met in Mexico. His wife, Melissa. The pride that his dad had in his son becoming first-generation law enforcement officer. That's America. That's California. And that's what's being torn asunder by Donald Trump and Stephen Miller. This is about families. It's about community. It's about the sense of place. It's about our economy. And it's about time Donald Trump grow up. It's about time Donald Trump understand the hell he is doing. And so I'm here in front of a church on church grounds, mindful that our democracy is not on firm ground, and mindful of our responsibility to be assertive at this moment, and we are, to support our diverse communities, and we will continue to do just that. The budget we just signed included additional dollars for legal representation. We did a special session providing resources for legal representation. Over $75 million we carried forward from last year for additional support. But we must be vigilant and resolved that as we focus on Epstein, we focus on the next day or distraction, that communities like Bell and Downey are being torn apart because of his cruelty and because of his incompetence. And so that's the purpose of this opportunity to share and to engage and, of course, ask any questions here today.
Governor Newsom, your personal and your governor's press office social media accounts have taken a much more aggressive tone over the last couple of weeks. Recently, the press office called Stephen Miller a cuck on Twitter. How do you differentiate yourself from Trump if you're using state and personal social media accounts to name call and attack him?
Well, it's a response to Stephen Chung in the White House and his use of that word. I don't think they understand any other kind of language, so I have no apologies for standing tall and firm and pushing back against their cruelty. And if it requires more clear language, requires a recognition that things have radically changed with Trump presidency, then I will assert myself as I feel fit. And I'll do so with clarity and conviction. The difference between Donald Trump and the Trump administration and the state of California and the work that's being done by many elected officials here is we don't just exercise our formal authority, we also exercise our moral authority.
Governor Newsom, last week we saw that the core civic California City, former California prison, has now been renamed the California City Immigration Processing Center. What is the state of California planning as far as health and safety oversight or other constitutional oversight of that facility when, if and when it reopens as an ICE processing?
So California, and we had advanced in the first Trump administration, California updated and advanced a lot of its oversight rules and regulations as it relates to the authority of the state that's vested in us as it relates to the specific issue of health and safety. We also had to recognize that we had to reconcile the federal jurisdiction, and there were certain limits as it relates to our direct involvement and direct engagement. The good news is, having gone through a version of what we're experiencing here today, but not at the scale of the cruelty that we're experiencing, that we had updated a lot of those rules and regulations, including resourcing members of the Department of Justice, specifically the AG's office, to provide that kind of oversight. I specifically had on this topic conversations with immigrant rights leaders about what their expectations were in terms of that support, how we can coordinate, collaborate, and share information. And that is our intent as it relates to that specific facility as well. Yeah, of course. Well, they're not. I mean, under the tenets, the police officers are not to aid and abet. As it relates to the issues of these raids, it's not. It's very clear as it relates to the policies, local policies, which distinguish themselves from state policies. That is not the role of local law enforcement. The role of local law enforcement is to create a framework of trust. As it relates to safety of individuals, be it their state employees, local employees, or federal employees, they have a responsibility as it relates to public safety. So I'm deeply mindful of that. There's a balancing act there. But when it comes to the safety of officers, I wish them no harm. Most of these folks have been conscripted. I mean, the National Guard men and women are heroes. A lot of you were out there taking selfies with them. Biggest issue they had in places like Santa Monica is so many, jugs of water came, so much food came. We were really proud of them. They're the same people. They're just under now a jurisdiction of someone who's unhinged by the name of Donald Trump. And so I want people to recognize that and respect that. So it's about public safety in that respect, broadly defined. That safety includes federal employees as well.
Governor, do you anticipate if there's a problem with, do you anticipate a possibility of a further drawdown of the National Guard and/or shipping the Marines back to their base, given the rules that Washington wants as far as the ability of ICE officers to arrest anybody who attacks federal officers? The White House on the 11th said literally anyone who throws rocks, whatever, assaults federal officers, they're freeing up ICE to actually detain and arrest those people for assault. If those rules of engagement hold, are you anticipating a further drawdown because there's no need for soldiers or anyone else to provide any kind of a buffer around ICE officers doing those type of operations?
Yeah, again, the utilization rate, the mission tasking of roughly 5,000 military personnel is about 5%. They claim it's 26.6%, and that's because they're in an operational readiness, but they're in Los Alamitos, an hour and a half away. They're sitting there behind the walls looking for things to do. 5%. So as it relates to the drawdown, they're a solution right now in search of a problem. But more importantly, I think this is the issue that I think we want to highlight. This is a preview of things to come. If you think this is about California, you are fooling yourself. These are operations you're going to see all across the United States of America. They've tested the boundaries of the law. They've tested the boundaries of public perception and what the public will accept. And they're going to export, including potentially members of our own state National Guard, to other states. So when they draw down and demobilize, the question is, for what? To go where? Under whose command, whose control? And to me, that's a more interesting question, is what ultimately becomes of these members of our National Guard. But look, you recall, we had close to 1,600 officers at certain points at the peak of what was going on in a couple square blocks or a couple blocks in Los Angeles. CHP officers and LAPD were protecting the National Guard. To your question, not the other way around. That's how absurd this whole thing has become. You would think there'd be some congressional oversight, but those guys have disappeared. Speaker Johnson, in name only. We can get to that. Question is how long he'll be Speaker. They're, of course, trying to change the game on that. That's a separate conversation.
Well, Governor, about that.
They use for fire protection now that they're going to be released. What's the plan here?
Well, I want to get them back under my control so we can get them back doing the kind of work to control wildfires. to keep our communities safe, to address the issue of counter-narcotics, to address the issue of fentanyl. I want to remind you guys, I put 394 of your National Guard men and women years and years ago on the border. I've hardly been timid. I've deployed the National Guard in multiple locations, multiple times. Going back to George Floyd, one of the largest deployments in U.S. history. With thousands of them, the 49th Infantry, the MPs rather, that were out there on the streets after the fires. They need to get back doing the rattlesnake teams, which are basically teams that work in partnership with other state agencies and conservation corps and CAL FIRE to do the vegetation and forest management, hundreds of them. So they'll be reassigned when they come back under our control. About 190 were already redeployed. The rest will start coming back as they're demobilized. I want to get them back in our counter-narcotics efforts and our drug interdiction efforts and the task forces that have been firmly assigned, and to support Border Patrol as it relates to some of that effort, not just what's coming in north, but what's going down south with all the gun running and cash that are going through, including those tunnels that I had the opportunity to explore and witness firsthand with my National Guard, or your National Guard, just a matter of months ago. So that's part of it. But I also want them back teaching our kids. I want them back walking the beat with their masks off, building trust, sense of community. And I'll tell you, the most damaging thing about what's going on right now is other law enforcement agencies, these good folks, are being impacted because people are losing trust in local law enforcement now. They don't know who is who. This is, if you wrote this script, some Hollywood could say that doesn't seem past any tests. People running around with masks and sunglasses on, and they can run around. I mean, I was in a farmer's market, true story, 2 weeks ago. And all of a sudden I started feeling, I had my hat and sunglasses on, walked a few blocks so no one can see. But they saw a few cars that we drove up in, a white and black car. And you started to feel, as I'm walking around, no one said a word. I was casually buying week's food for the kids. And you felt something. And all of a sudden, the manager of the farmer's market came up asking our folks who they were, because they heard that ICE was there. It was just the governor. That's how bad it's become.
Governor, has the White House indicated to you when they might consider pulling back the ban in 2000?
Well, they better do it now, today, next few hours. I'm a taxpayer. I don't like to see my money wasted like this. There's no fiscal conservatives left. They proved that in the big, beautiful betrayal. But this is comedy. Donald Trump waxing on about the Fed chair today and cost overruns on a new building. How about the hundreds of millions of dollars he's burned just to try to sear in your mind that he's some tough guy because he didn't get enough hugs from his parents growing up.
Governor, you alluded to this.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Governor. Alex Bates from Agenda. Do you credit the Trump administration for assisting with restoring law and order in Los Angeles?
Exact opposite. He incited more anxiety. He's incited more unrest. He's incited more uncertainty. He's exacerbated the conditions. Exactly the opposite. It's not even a close call. I revere the men and women in uniform, police officers from city jurisdictions, county jurisdictions, state jurisdictions. Universally, they say that. Not just the governor of California saying that. No, I don't credit him. I credit him for creating chaos. He's a chaos agent. He is not about calming people's nerves. He's not about public safety. This is the same president of the United States that incited almost a riot, in fact, did incite a riot, and tried to torch this democracy on January 6th. Police officers were hurt. He incited that riot. He promoted violence. He has no problem promoting violence, Donald Trump, as long as it services his aims and his ends. He did not promote peace. Quite the contrary.
Governor,
Governor, you alluded just now to.
You said to play that game.
Forgive me, because she's going. I know she's never going to ever talk to me again. So forgive me. No. This is. Forgive me.
Sorry. Thank you for your patience, Governor. You alluded earlier to Speaker Johnson maybe not being Speaker anymore in this conversation that's been going on about redistricting.
No, that's good.
Great
Yeah.
answer. It sounds like you're looking for, if you potentially wanted to reopen this conversation about drawing maps.
Which I don't. Goes to your question.
Well,
These guys, look, you got to. I don't. It's not what I want to do. Let me explain it, because I'm going to validate where you're going. I was one of, at the time, I don't recall, this may be overstated, but I thought I was one of a handful of Democrats in elected office that supported independent redistricting when it first was promoted. I support independent redistricting. I think it should be done at a national level. At the same time, I also am mindful next year is the 250th anniversary of the founding of this great country. And I'm very fearful about what's going on in this country. When Donald Trump calls in to the Texas legislature along the lines of the phone calls he made saying, find me some votes in Georgia, and says, find me 5 more seats in Texas, they're playing by a different set of rules. They can't win by the traditional game, so they want to change the game. We can act holier than thou. We can sit on the sidelines, talk about the way the world should be. Or we can recognize the existential nature that is this moment. And so it took me a moment to reconcile my own feelings. Very proud of the work Governor Schwarzenegger and others did on that. It's a national model. Right now, there may not be a nation to model. And so my response to that, and I want to finish because it's the question you're asking, has been to explore what we can do about it. And that's exactly what I've tasked my team. And there are 2 alternatives if you're interested. You can call a special session and we can move forward. And we're exploring that. And we've had real conversations about that. There are also a number of legal experts that have come to us exploring an alternative to that. Through an urgency measure, the legislature can move forward with new maps as it relates to federal districts. And that is option. That is also being considered. And both of those are being advanced in real time, not only with members of the legislature, but others that are interested because they feel the same pressures I do about the existential threat of what Donald Trump and some of these Republican states are trying to do.
But forgive me to ask a question to this. I'm having a hard time squaring how that does still, either of those options, not fundamentally bump up against the will of the voters who approved an independent.
Well, it's pretty easy. The option 1 is, by definition, reconciles that. By definition, because it would require those same voters to make a determination on the basis of current facts. We can be stubborn, and just assume everything's status quo ante. I mean, they've changed. There's no. Used to be 3 co-equal branches of government. One's completely disappeared in real time. The rule of law is being challenged every single day. Just ask all the masked people running around here. People are disappearing. Quite literally, a word you hear all the time. People are quite literally disappearing with no due process, no rights. The courts take forever to advance the cause of any reconciliation. You've got a president that's talking about recalling folks and judges that he disagrees with, or just completely dismissing. He runs right up to the edge on the rule of law on decisions that are made by the courts and whether or not it works for him or decides on a whim that it won't. So things have changed. And so that would be the argument I would make. But again, I don't come to this lightly. This is not a point of, it's just a point of rationalization. And I hope a realization for everyone else. Everything has changed and it's changing in real time. And I'm not going to be the guy that said I coulda, woulda, shoulda. I'm not going to be passive at this moment. I'm not going to look at my kids in the eyes and say I was a little timid or I didn't like the word that this guy used. I'm just not going to be that guy. I'm sorry. What more evidence do you need? I mean, everything that damn's happened last 6 months in this part of the state. So that's my approach. And to the extent that others share it, by definition, it requires the consent of our represented body, the legislature, and they'll make that determination. And if they choose the path of a ballot initiative, the people of this state will decide for themselves in the spirit that brought you that law in the first place.
Governor, given we've had a federal judge rule the tactics that ICE has been using on the streets here in Southern California are a problem. If that is upheld, where they have to change their tactics regarding how officers are on the street, how they're identified, how they actually do arrest and apprehension. If ICE is forced to modify those tactics and policies, do you think there may be a reduction in the number of problems that we have regarding enforcement?
Well, I would hope so, just the indiscriminate nature of this. And by the way, I take a back seat to no one. You want to coordinate Donald Trump, you want a partner, you've got a partner. You want to coordinate with violent criminals? I'm happy to partner with you. I've got the receipts. No other governor could lay claim to over 11,000 individuals we've coordinated with ICE since I've become governor of the state of California. Violent criminals. This is not about violent criminals. Quite the contrary. So as it relates to the random nature, this indiscriminate nature, I hope the judge begins to rationalize that, this sort of racialization of these enforcements. I mean, Holman himself, talk about a tough guy. Holman himself, talk about a self-inflicted wound. He said, yeah, on the basis we can do whatever we want, on the basis of how you look. Some cases, what car you're driving. So that was a pretty obvious decision, the lower court. But what's no longer obvious is what happens at the appellate and obviously the Supreme Court. But I'm hoping it will rationalize some of this. And at peril, again, you're going to see this in other cities. And I worry about people's lives. I'm telling you, we're on the verge. This is serious. I mean, if someone just randomly, if I'm walking down the street with my kids and someone grabs me with a mask on and tries to throw me in an unmarked van, and I am looking at my kids, I'm surprised someone hasn't gotten hurt. Someone is going to get hurt. So the best thing that happened to this administration may be that they have to come to realization of what they're doing and change their tactics, even if they're not compelled to do so at the appellate level. I pray that's the case.
You're thinking a 10-state moment is possible?
I'm not going there. And look, that gets hyperbolic.
Somebody already fired shots at federal agents the other day.
Yeah, I worry about that. And you got someone who dropped 30 feet because they were scared to death and lost their lives. Farm worker. Yeah, I met that 16-year-old kid. His mom and dad were disappeared after 20 years going to the same workplace, dragged out of their cars. I met an 86-year-old woman who, by the way, coincidentally, in 1986, was able to get her citizenship. Yeah. And she said she literally had PTSD. She was expressing and she was shaking. As she was sitting there in a coffee shop, she said, when I heard the helicopters, it reminded me when I was a kid. And we used to learn how to hide in the baskets in the fields. She said that's what it felt like again. Despite Donald Trump saying we're not going after workplaces, we're not going after nonviolent folks that are essential to our economic well-being. We're not going after farm workers. We're not going after folks in the hospitality and leisure industry.
Last question.
No thanks. Yeah, we're trying to, it's interesting. It was a question I got today. And I think it's much deeper than people think. You know, we tend to measure things in the aggregate. We don't live in the aggregate. You know, it's not about GDP. It's about communities, these small businesses. This is not, with all due respect, about Apple and NVIDIA. You know, it's not about Tim Cook being able to make a call and getting an exemption, or some of those farmers that after the rage in Ventura, on behalf of the Farm Bureau, because they were big donors to Donald Trump, made the call. So he the next day said, I'm going to back off. Of course he didn't, but said he would. They have no advocate, these small businesses. It's incalculable when you're down 6 to 7% in business. Imagine being down 60 or 70%. You don't get that back. You could lose your house because you've got a line of credit on your house against your business. You could lose everything, your dreams, your family. How do you calculate that? And so I don't know the answer to that. I want to know I'm mindful. We need to understand that. I pray that these guys pay attention in Washington, D.C. and end this charade. Thank you guys very, very much. Thank you guys.
Press to just stay here.
The truth is more important than ever. Check out our new Truth Over Lies collection at store.MeidasTouch.com. All 100% USA union made.